Welcome to session. This session is part of the course Journalism, Concepts and Processes. In one of our last sessions, we have discussed the brief history of Indian journalism. We broadly discussed the trends that emerged. The media during pre-independence period, which was a kind of advocacy journalism. Media was by and large committed to champion the cause of independence. Post-independence period media, which was committed to nation building, which played a great role in our efforts to eradicate social evils. In the 1970s, we witnessed emergence of a professional journalism, when these concepts of objectivity, fairness, balance were considered to be foundation of the concept and practice of the journalism. So it was a journey from advocacy journalism to development-focused journalism to professional journalism. Then we discussed that in the emergence of the new market, new economy in 1991, and the emergence of infotainment. When the media that used to be a public service enterprise, it got transformed into a business enterprise whose main objective was to optimize the profit. So there was a huge market that emerged, huge consumer market. Advertising industry acquired huge dimensions, and then media was in the quest to optimize the profit. It was dependent on the advertising industry. So more market share in the middle class, more market share among the consumers will fetch more advertisements and more revenue. So the media gradually started concentrating on those segments of the population. So now, for example, Delhi and Mumbai, these two cities, they contribute around 70% of advertising revenue. So for every media outlet, it is very important to have a strong penetration in these two cities. In fact, if you take some of the major metropolitan cities of the country into considerations, New Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune, Chennai, and few others, then it's by and large these major metropolitan cities which are main target of the media. That means they want optimum audience in those areas, because it is those areas where the middle class having additional purchasing power is their target audience. They want to attract a major chunk of their viewers or their readers in that segment of the population. So today we are witnessing a very, very stiff market competition among newspapers and news channels. So today, in fact, this is a system of which is being governed by the TRP. TRP is deeply, we call it television rating point. TRP is for the television. TRP is a system that some agency is collecting. That means it has installed people's meter in some thousands in households, and they are getting some feed from these households that which channels they were watching. And accordingly, they calculate the rating of different television channels. The highly faulty system of TRP collection, because our country is very diverse, our taste and preferences are totally different, but still this TRP system, whatever it is the governing factor as far as advertising industry is concerned, and as far as advertising revenue of the television channel is concerned. So this TRP race has brought in huge amount of distortions in media programming. Today what we are witnessing is the grave attention journalism. New channels are more in the business of grabbing attention of the audience rather than really providing them the quality content. TRP again is now, for example, if you are watching television, as far as the fundamental content is concerned, it's almost the same. There is no variety, there is no diversity. You keep on changing the channels and you are watching the same. That's the situation today. But in their presentation, they have evolved a different styles. Great amount of aggression, great amount of talk shows, shouting and counter shoutings, inviting people who hold some very extremist and hawkish opinions. Then there is a great amount of shouting, because if you see uh, the kind of people who are invited as an expert at the TV channels, the choices is made in such a way that they will attack, grab the attention of the people. So what really is happening is that at times we watch a television channel and there's something which is very dramatic or very unique, and you start watching the channel. So even after watching that channel, we may be criticizing it, we may be cursing it. But the point is that we have watched that channel for half an hour. And that half an hour is crucial for TRP, because TRP will go up. So here the point is, it is something they are providing, which is very sensational, very dramatic, which will grab attention of the people. So somewhere, this brand of journalism, primarily in the television news channel, has become so dominant that the content is very superficial. There is no content at all. Some of the issues which are not the core issues of our society, of our nation, they are highlighted, they are given coverage, something which is unthinkable. At times, most of the time, the core issues of the people are getting marginalized. The major issues that we are confronting today, whether it's our economy, our education, our farm sectors, our workers, our pigeons. So the kind of real issues that they are confronting, they are hard news. It's something which is very juicy, which is very interesting, which is very dramatic, which will grab attention of the people. That's what today the entire television news program is based on. So that's something that means that's what has happened now. Now, because next question comes, now again I will point out that this is very, very important, that we must keep in mind that all these television channels, most of the newspapers, their basic content is almost the same. I will just recall one example, that in Delhi, for example, just to cite an example, which will make the concept clear. In Delhi, for example, in 70s and 80s, there were some 5-6 newspapers having different political orientation. For example, Times of India group was considered centrist. Hindustan Times group was considered a status quoist, pro-government, whichever party is in power. Indian Express was considered strongly anti-government. There was Patriot, which was pro-communist. There was Motherland, which was pro-Jansangh at that time, now BJP. There was National Herald, which was mouth organ of the Congress party, and some other newspapers and magazines. The point is, there were some 5-6 newspapers with 5-6 different political dimensions, a political ideology, that they were providing variety and diversity of the content of people you can choose from. As a journalist, when I was a young journalist, we used to read all these 5 or 6 newspapers to get an entire idea of various political and ideological perspective on any issue of the day. Our media habits were totally different at that time, in the 70s and 80s. There was no such as satellite television. There was no internet. So our generation of journalists, we used to read a lot. And reading these 5, 6 newspapers was very essential for us to develop some clear-cut vision of any contemporary issue. So my point was that we were having that diversity and variety at that point of time. Today, that diversity, that even during that period, what really happened is that in later phase, in the early 90s, after commercialization, the big newspapers like Times of India and Hindustan Times, they 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 cut down their prices drastically. And then for other people like Patriot, Motherland, National Herald, its survival became very, very difficult. These newspapers could not survive. And then there is a situation when the 90% of the market of New Delhi was being controlled by only Hindustan Times and Times of India. I forgot to mention one people. There were statesmen also. The statesmen were strongly pro-free market economy, strongly perceived to be from America. That was another newspaper which was significant in the media landscape at that point of time. So what really happened is that because of this price war, Times of India and Hindustan Times were in a position to sell their newspaper at a very low, at much lower price. Because they were not dependent on the revenue that they were generating from the readers. Their major chunk of the revenue was coming from the advertising. But other papers, they were dependent on the revenue that was coming from the readers also. So they ceased virtually to exist or got marginalized. 90% of the market was being controlled by Times of India and Hindustan Times. The result was that there was some unwritten agreement between these two newspapers. Unwritten agreement was that we will not spend too much money on news gathering operations. Both of us will depend on news agencies. So we'll save plenty of money. So parallel to that, on the one hand, they were becoming big enterprise. They drastically reduced their budget for news gathering operations. And then the net result was that in basic content, Times of India and sometimes they became almost the same. Some variation here and there, but that variety and diversity was totally disappeared even between these two newspapers. Even within the newspaper, for example, now Times of India. Times of India during that period, it was a platform of all political perspectives. I worked in Times of India during that time. So there were a number of assistants with a different political orientation. Some were rightists, some were leftists, some were centrists, some were pro-BJP, some different, all shades of opinions were reflected in the Times of India. Editorial policy was common, but all the student editors were contributing articles. Articles were being commissioned also from outsiders. But Times of India group's editorial page at the time was very, very democratic. It was providing platform to all ideological perspective on any issue of the given day. Now coming back to today's scenario again, the point is whatever the kind of media that we are witnessing today is that the mainstream media, dominant media I'm talking about, that there is no variety, there is no diversity in the content. In television channels, there is no variety, no diversity. The basic content is the same. It's only the difference of the treatment, which has some kind of a variation. So this really resulted into a unique situation now. The credibility of the media. Find that you are number one in the TRP. You have a huge market share. You are generating a lot of revenue. Fine with that. But the point is that what is the credibility? Do people believe in you? So that is, I think, major questions that we have to address today. Because somehow in our country, this TRP mechanism is having the free hand. Because there are always, across the globe, there are always different kinds of channels. We have Discovery, we have National Geographic, we have History channels, we have Epic channels. These channels are also existing. They are catering the niche audiences. Now, in our country, we have not witnessing that segment that if the audience of a particular news channels or the newspaper is of very niche kind. They are the loyal audiences because this loyalty factor is very, very important also. This loyalty factor doesn't exist in our country. Loyalty means when people, they are loyal to one particular channel because they like that channel. In our country, variation is very huge. This TRP map keeps on drastically changing every week. This loyalty factor is somewhere missing because our TV channels are not providing unique kind of a content that will attract loyal viewers. Credibility, from my personal experience, I can tell you that during 80s and 90s, when I was a journalist, journalism was highly respected profession. Wherever a journalist who people will be very curious to meet him. They will be curious to know what is happening in the country across the globe. A journalist was considered that he is a highly knowledgeable person. He's a very intellectual person. He was highly respected. Today I have seen scenario that whenever a journalist, specifically a TV journalist, if he visits some middle class family, then he has to face immense amount of criticism. The credibility of media has gone down drastically. The respectability of the profession has gone down drastically. This is no more now a profession which commands the respect of the people. I'm sorry to show you that there is a certain amount of repulsion in the minds of the people towards the media, especially the television news channels, which is reflected, of course, because for example, of films, which always reflect the popular sentiments. In recent times, we have seen a number of films where media has been targeted. And that was important component of entertainment. Media was being attacked in these feature films, and people were feeling happy about it. So somewhere this entire dynamics, on the one hand, we are democracy, we have our constitutional provision of the freedom of expressions, and from where we derive our freedom of press. We have a free press, we have free freedom of expressions. At the same time, we have to think that whether our media is genuinely the platform of expression of people's voice, the way it should be in a democracy. We have to ask ourselves that to what extent media is credible, to what extent people believe in our media, to what extent they think that whatever media is telling them is the truth. That these are the very, very fundamental questions that we need to address. In fact, here I would like to mention that media academics can play very, very important role in this direction. But unfortunately, the research in our country is a very pathetic form. For example, in the United States of America, there is one the center, they trust the Center of Excellence. They bring out an annual report every year, the state of news media. In that report, they analyze the American media in terms of its believability, its credibility, its ownership pattern, the market share of various platforms, newspapers, television channels, radio, web platforms, whatever media channels are there. So it's a kind of a report which is very, very authentic, the huge sample base. And that report is considered some eye-opener. To cite some example about the research, during Iraq War, before the invasion of Iraq, the entire American media was built, was involved, but directly and directly involved in molding public opinion in favor of the invasion of Iraq. So they were on the two major platforms that American administration launched its propaganda. One was that Saddam Hussein possesses nuclear weapons, and other was he is hobnobbing with Al Qaeda, Bin Laden. An entire American media for almost 3 years was handing troops to the Bush administration to create that war hysteria. So in fact, one of the New York Times leading columnists, her name was Judith. She wrote one article in New York Times. The title of that article was From Smoking Gun to Mushroom Cloud. The major thrust of that article was that Saddam Hussein is about to possess nuclear weapons that will be used against the United States. But after the end of the Iraq War, American academicians, they conducted a lot of research. And then it was pointed out, it was become very clear that entire news reporting during that period, that 3 years period, was based on the official sources. It was to the extent that New York Times tendered its apology to its readers that we have failed in our duty to you, and we practice a journalism which is based on the government official sources, and in turn we became the victim of government propaganda. So that's what I'm saying is that the academics and the media in our country, we don't have any research. In the United States, after every event, within 6 months we can find 5-6 books analyzing the coverage of the particular event. After 9/11, within 6 months there were 6-7 books in the market we critically analyzed the coverage of American media of the 9/11 terrorist attack. The entire American media became ultra-nationalist, very hysterical. Anchors were putting up the American flags, which was criticized. So what I'm saying is that in our country, the credibility of the media, the believability of the media has drastically gone down. But we don't have any platforms, any research where we can just get the truth, bottom of the truth, that what really is the credibility of the media. And then encourage the media to develop some kind of lower audiences to negate this faulty mechanism, the TRP, which is playing havoc now, which is not informing people at all, which is not educating people at all, which is totally misguiding them, misinforming them, disinforming them, full of fake news. And that I'm talking about the mainstream media, about the major news channels. They have become not platform of disinformation, fake news, very undue sensationalization, creating all kinds of fear, damaging the communal harmony in the country. Because for them, the TRP is the only motive, and they can go to an extent to enhance their TRP. So there's a situation that we're facing today. So these all issues, they need to be addressed by the academics. They need to be addressed by academic institutions, by scholars, by intelligentsia, so that this entire myth of the TRP can be shattered. And we evaluate our media in terms of its believability and credibility. So we'll conclude here. Thank you very much.